Alden Trask turned his pickup truck into the driveway of his suburban home on Maple Street. The October air carried the scent of burning leaves and the promise of winter. Another day at the manufacturing plant behind him, another evening with his family ahead. At 38, Alden had learned to appreciate these simple moments. His Army days had taught him that peace was something you earned, not something you took for granted. He grabbed his lunch cooler from the passenger seat and walked toward the front door. The house looked picture-perfect in the fading daylight, white picket fence, manicured lawn, flower boxes that Marla insisted on maintaining. Everything in its place, exactly as it should be. The front door opened before he could reach for his keys. "Daddy!" Nina's voice rang out across the yard. His 8-year-old daughter bounced on her toes in the doorway, her blonde pigtails swaying with excitement. She held something in her small hands, a clear plastic bag with what looked like a chocolate chip cookie inside. "Hey there, kiddo." Alden dropped his cooler on the porch steps and scooped Nina into his arms. She giggled as he spun her around once before setting her down. "What's that you got there?" "Someone left it in the mailbox." Nina held up the bag, her blue eyes bright with wonder. "Maybe it's from Mommy? She said she might surprise me today." Alden took the bag from her hands, examining it closely. The cookie looked homemade, thick, loaded with chocolate chips, still soft in the center. No note, no label, just a simple treat in a sandwich bag. Something cold settled in his stomach. "Did you already eat some of it?" "Just a little bite." "It's really good." Nina skipped back into the house, heading for the living room where her coloring books were spread across the coffee table. Alden followed her inside, his mind already working through the logistics. Who would leave a cookie in their mailbox? Neighbors sometimes dropped off treats during holidays, but Halloween was still weeks away. Marla hadn't mentioned anything about expecting a delivery. He pulled out his phone and dialed his wife's number. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. "Marla, it's me. Call me back when you get this." Nina found a cookie in the mailbox, and she's already eaten some of it. "Did you leave it there?" He hung up and walked into the living room. Nina was sprawled on the carpet, humming to herself as she colored a picture of a unicorn. The empty cookie bag sat on the coffee table beside her. "Nina, how much of that cookie did you eat?" "Almost all of it. I saved a little piece for you." She pointed to a small chunk of cookie sitting on a napkin. "Want some?" "Maybe later, sweetheart." "How are you feeling?" "Good. My tummy feels a little funny, but not bad funny. Just different funny." Alden's phone buzzed. Marla's name appeared on the screen. "Hey," he answered. "I got your message." "What cookie?" Marla's voice sounded distracted, like she was driving or walking somewhere noisy. "Nina found a chocolate chip cookie in our mailbox. She said maybe you left it as a surprise." "I didn't leave any cookie. Why would I put food in the mailbox?" "That's weird." "That's what I thought. Do you know anyone who might have?" "Alden, I'm in the middle of something. Can we talk about this later?" "It's probably just some neighbor kid playing around." The line went dead. Alden stared at his phone, that cold feeling in his stomach growing stronger. Marla's dismissal felt wrong. If someone had left food for their daughter, shouldn't she be more concerned about where it came from? "Daddy." Nina's voice sounded smaller now, less energetic. "I don't feel good." Alden spun around. Nina was sitting up on the carpet, her face pale and her hands pressed against her stomach. As he watched, she doubled over and made a retching sound. "Nina." He was across the room in 2 steps, kneeling beside her. "What's wrong, baby?" "My tummy hurts really bad. And I feel dizzy." Her words came out slurred, like she was having trouble forming them properly. Alden's training kicked in. He'd seen poisoning cases during his Army service soldiers who'd eaten contaminated field rations or been exposed to chemical agents. The symptoms were unmistakable: nausea, disorientation, difficulty speaking. "Nina, look at me. Can you stand up?" She tried to push herself to her feet, but collapsed back onto the carpet. Her breathing was becoming shallow and rapid. Alden grabbed his phone and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? "My 8-year-old daughter has been poisoned. She ate a cookie that someone left in our mailbox, and now she's showing signs of acute toxicity. I need an ambulance immediately." "Sir, can you tell me your daughter's current condition?" "Nausea, disorientation, difficulty standing, slurred speech, rapid breathing. She consumed an unknown substance approximately 15 minutes ago." Nina made another retching sound and then went limp. Alden dropped the phone and checked her pulse, weak but present. Her breathing was still shallow but steady. Sir? Sir, are you there? Alden picked up the phone. She's lost consciousness. Pulse is weak but present. I'm going to start basic life support. The ambulance is on the way. Stay on the line with me. Alden placed Nina in the recovery position and checked her airway. Clear. Her pulse remained weak but steady. He'd done this before, in field conditions with wounded soldiers, but this was his daughter. This was Nina. The next 10 minutes passed in a blur of sirens, paramedics, and medical jargon. Alden rode in the ambulance, holding Nina's hand while the EMTs worked to stabilize her vitals. She remained unconscious but breathing. At the hospital. He paced the waiting room while doctors ran tests. Marla arrived 30 minutes later, her makeup perfect and her designer purse clutched in her manicured hands. How is she? Marla asked, but her tone suggested she was asking about the weather rather than their daughter's life. Unconscious. They're running toxicology tests. This is insane. Who would poison a child's cookie? Alden studied his wife's face. She looked concerned, but something felt off about her reaction. Too composed, too controlled, like she was performing concern rather than feeling it. Good question, he said. Who would? Dr. Patricia Mason emerged from the emergency room at 11:47 p.m., her scrubs wrinkled and her expression grim. Alden stood immediately, his hands clenched at his sides. Marla remained seated, scrolling through her phone. Mr. and Mrs. Trask? I have updates on Nina's condition. How is she? Alden asked. She's stable. We've successfully counteracted the toxin in her system, and her vitals have returned to normal ranges. She's conscious and asking for you. Relief flooded through Alden's chest. Can we see her? In a moment. First, I need to discuss our findings with you. Dr. Mason glanced around the waiting room, noting the other families within earshot. Perhaps we could speak privately? They followed her to a small consultation room. Dr. Mason closed the door and turned to face them. Nina ingested a compound called acipromazine. It's a veterinary sedative, primarily used for large animals. In the dosage she consumed, it could have been fatal if left untreated. Marla looked up from her phone. Veterinary sedative? How would that end up in a cookie? That's the concerning part, Dr. Mason continued. This wasn't accidental contamination. Someone deliberately mixed acipromazine into that cookie dough. The distribution was even throughout the cookie, suggesting it was added during the baking process. Alden felt the blood drain from his face. You're saying someone intentionally poisoned my daughter? I'm saying the evidence suggests deliberate introduction of a controlled substance into food intended for consumption. I'm required by law to report this to local authorities. Of course, Alden said. We want to know who did this. Dr. Mason nodded. Detective Byrne from the Loveland Police Department will want to speak with you both. In the meantime, we'll keep Nina overnight for observation. After the doctor left, Alden and Marla sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Marla spoke. This is crazy. Who would want to hurt Nina? I don't know, but I'm going to find out. When they returned home at 2 a.m., Alden went straight to the mailbox. He pulled out his phone's flashlight and examined the area carefully. The mailbox itself showed no signs of tampering, but something caught his eye. Their security camera, the one mounted on the garage to monitor the driveway, was pointed down at an odd angle. Alden had installed the system himself 2 years ago, and he knew exactly how each camera was positioned. Inside the house, he booted up his computer and accessed the security system's control panel. The camera feed showed a 7-minute gap between 3:17 p.m. and 3:24 p.m., exactly when he would have been driving home from work. Someone had disabled the camera, left the cookie, and then restored the camera's position. The system required a password to access the controls remotely. Only 2 people knew that password, himself and Marla. Alden stared at the screen, his mind working through the implications. Either someone had hacked their security system with sophisticated technical knowledge, or someone with authorized access had deliberately created a blind spot. He opened a new browser window and began researching acipromazine. Veterinary sedative, controlled substance, requires prescription access. Not something you could buy at a corner store. His phone buzzed with a text message from Marla, staying at the hospital tonight in case Nina needs anything. You should get some sleep. Alden looked at the timestamp. The message had been sent 15 minutes ago, while they were both driving home from the hospital, while Marla was sitting in the passenger seat of his truck. When had she sent it? The next morning, Alden arrived at the hospital at 7 a.m. with a bag of Nina's clothes and her favorite stuffed elephant. He found his daughter, sitting up in bed, coloring in a new book that one of the nurses had brought her. "Daddy." Nina's smile was bright and genuine, no trace of the previous night's trauma. "Look what I drew." She held up a picture of their family stick figures with yellow hair standing in front of Brown House. Alden, Marla, and Nina, all holding hands under a bright blue sky. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. How are you feeling?" "Much better. The doctor said I can go home today if my blood tests are good." "That's great news." Marla arrived 20 minutes later, carrying a cup of expensive coffee and wearing a fresh outfit. Her hair was styled perfectly, her makeup flawless. "Good morning, honey," she said to Nina, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "How's my brave girl?" "I'm all better, Mommy. Can we go home now? We have to wait for the doctor to say it's okay." Marla pulled out her phone and began typing. "I have a few errands to run, but I'll be back this afternoon." Alden watched his wife's face as she interacted with Nina. Marla smiled and said the right words, but there was something missing. No relief in her eyes, no lingering worry about their daughter's brush with death. She seemed more focused on her phone than on Nina's recovery. "What errands?" Alden asked. "Just some things for the house. Shopping, dry cleaning. Normal stuff. Maybe you should stay here with Nina today. She almost died last night." Marla's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "She's fine now. The doctor said so. I can't put my entire life on hold every time something happens." "Every time something happens?" Alden felt anger building in his chest, but he kept his voice level. "This wasn't something happening. Someone tried to kill our daughter. That's a little dramatic, don't you think? It was probably just some sick prank that went wrong." Before Alden could respond, Nina spoke up. "Daddy, can Grandma Gretchen come visit me? I want to show her my picture." "Of course, sweetheart. I'll call her right now." Alden stepped into the hallway and dialed his mother's number. Gretchen Trask answered on the second ring. "Alden, how's Nina?" "She's okay, Mom. Awake and talking. But I need to ask you something." "What is it?" "Can you come to the hospital today? And maybe stay with us for a few days while we figure out what happened?" There was a pause. "Of course. But what aren't you telling me?" Alden glanced back toward Nina's room, where Marla was now speaking quietly on her phone near the window. "I think we might need your help with more than just Nina's recovery. I'll be there in an hour." Gretchen Trask arrived at the hospital carrying a duffel bag and wearing the no-nonsense expression that had served her well during 30 years as an emergency room nurse. At 68, she moved with the efficient confidence of someone who had seen every kind of human crisis and wasn't easily rattled. "Where's my granddaughter?" she asked, pulling Alden into a quick hug. "Room 314. "Mom, before you go in there, I need to tell you something." Alden quickly summarized the events of the previous evening, watching his mother's face grow increasingly serious as he spoke. "Someone with access to veterinary drugs," Gretchen said when he finished. "That narrows it down considerably. The police will start their investigation today." "Good. What about Marla? How's she handling this?" Alden hesitated. "See for yourself." They walked into Nina's room together. Nina immediately brightened when she saw her grandmother. "Grandma, look at my picture." Gretchen crossed to the bed and admired Nina's drawing with genuine enthusiasm. "This is wonderful, sweetheart. I can see our whole family right here." Marla looked up from her phone. "Oh, hi, Gretchen. I didn't know you were coming. My granddaughter was poisoned. Of course I'm coming, right? Well, I'm sure everything will be fine now." Marla gathered her purse and phone. "I really do need to run those errands. I'll see you all later." She kissed Nina goodbye and left without looking back. Gretchen watched her go, then turned to Alden with raised eyebrows. "Errands?" That's what she said. Gretchen sat down in the chair beside Nina's bed. Her weathered hands smoothed Nina's hair away from her face, and her voice took on the gentle tone she reserved for patients and grandchildren. "Nina, honey, can you tell Grandma about the cookie? Where exactly did you find it?" "It was in the mailbox in a plastic bag." I thought maybe Mommy left it for me because she said she might surprise me. Did Mommy say that yesterday? No, a few days ago. She said sometimes people need surprises to make them happy. Gretchen glanced at Alden. What kind of surprises, sweetheart? I don't know. Just surprises. Nina returned to her coloring book, already losing interest in the conversation. Later, when Nina had fallen asleep for an afternoon nap, Gretchen pulled Alden into the hallway. That woman didn't leave this hospital because of errands, she said quietly. What do you mean? I've been watching people in crisis for 30 years, Alden. I know what real fear looks like, and I know what fake concern looks like. Your wife isn't afraid for Nina's safety. Maybe she's just handling it differently than we would. Maybe. Or maybe she already knows Nina is safe now because she knows what was in that cookie and how much of it Nina ate. Alden felt something cold settle in his stomach again. Mom, that's a serious accusation. I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm just telling you what I see. She smiles like she's hiding a knife behind her back. That evening, after bringing Nina home from the hospital, Alden waited until his family was asleep before beginning his work. He moved quietly through the house, his military training serving him well as he installed small surveillance devices in strategic locations, that a micro camera behind the living room bookshelf, angled to capture the couch and coffee table. Another in the kitchen, hidden inside a decorative plant that sat on top of the refrigerator. A third in the master bedroom, concealed within the frame of a family photo on the dresser. Each device was wireless, battery-powered, and capable of recording both video and audio. They would transmit to a receiver hidden in his workshop in the garage, where he could monitor the feeds remotely. Alden had learned long ago that information was the most powerful weapon in any conflict. During his Army service, successful missions depended on intelligence, knowing your enemy's capabilities, intentions, and weaknesses before they knew you were watching. That he finished the installation at 2 a.m. and returned to bed. Marla was sound asleep, her breathing deep and regular. In the soft glow from the hallway nightlight, she looked peaceful and innocent. But Alden found himself studying her face like he would study a map of enemy territory. The next morning, he called his friend Lyle Carver. Alden, hey man, I heard about Nina on the news. How's she doing? She's okay. Lyle, I need a favor. Anything. What do you need? Can you meet me for coffee this morning? There's something I want to discuss with you privately. They met at a diner on the other side of town, away from Alden's neighborhood and Marla's usual shopping areas. Lyle Carver was a tall, thin man with prematurely gray hair and the pale complexion of someone who spent most of his time indoors. He worked as an IT engineer for a regional telecommunications company, and his technical skills had helped Alden with various projects over the years. What's going on? Lyle asked after they'd ordered coffee. Alden kept his voice low. I need you to help me recover some deleted data from Marla's phone. Lyle's eyebrows rose. Dude, that's some serious relationship stuff. Are you sure you want to go down that road? Someone tried to kill Nina. Someone with access to the security system password and knowledge of veterinary drugs. I need to know if Marla is involved. Jesus. Okay, yeah, I can help with that. Do you have access to her phone? She has 2 phones. One regular smartphone that she uses openly, and a second phone that she thinks I don't know about. I've seen her texting on it when she thinks I'm not looking. A burner phone. That's not good, man. Can you clone the data without her knowing? If I can get physical access to both devices for about 10 minutes each, yeah, I can pull everything: call logs, text messages, emails, app data, even deleted files. Good. Can you come over for dinner tonight? Bring your laptop. Say you're showing me something work-related. Sure. But Alden, if we find something bad, then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. That evening, Lyle arrived with his laptop bag and a bottle of wine for dinner. Marla seemed pleased to have company, playing the role of gracious hostess with practiced ease. She wore a blue dress that accentuated her figure and smiled warmly as she served the meal she'd prepared. So Lyle, how's the tech business treating you? She asked as they ate. Can't complain. Always something new to learn, always problems to solve. That must be exciting. Alden's job is so routine sometimes. The same thing day after day. Alden watched his wife's face as she spoke. There was something dismissive in her tone, something that suggested she found his work and perhaps him boring. After dinner, Alden and Lyle retreated to the living room while Marla cleaned up in the kitchen. Lyle opened his laptop and began explaining a fictional software project while secretly running data recovery programs on Marla's phones. The process took 12 minutes. 12 minutes during which Alden made conversation about network security while watching his wife move around the kitchen, loading the dishwasher and wiping down counters. Got it, Lyle whispered. I'll analyze everything tonight and call you tomorrow. After Lyle left, Alden helped Marla finish cleaning up. She seemed relaxed and content, humming softly as she put away dishes. That was nice, she said. We should have people over more often. Yeah, it was good to see Lyle. He's sweet. A little nerdy, but sweet. They watched television together for an hour before going to bed. Marla fell asleep quickly, but Alden lay awake staring at the ceiling. Somewhere in the digital information that Lyle had recovered, there might be answers. Or there might be confirmation of suspicions he desperately hoped were wrong. His phone buzzed with a text message. Lyle's name appeared on the screen. Check your email. We need to talk. Alden slipped out of bed and went to his computer. In his inbox was a message from Lyle with an encrypted attachment. He downloaded the file and opened it. The first document was a call log showing dozens of calls between Marla's burner phone and a number registered to Quinn Halbier. The calls had been going on for 3 months, with increasing frequency over the past 2 weeks. The second document contained recovered text messages. Alden's hands trembled slightly as he read through them. Marla, this house feels like a prison. I need to get out. Quinn, we've talked about this. You know what has to happen. Marla, I can't keep pretending to be the perfect wife. I'm dying inside. Quinn, soon. We just need to be patient a little longer. Marla, what about Nina? Quinn, she's young. She'll adapt. Kids are resilient. Marla, and Alden. Quinn, leave that to me. The final document was an email chain between Marla and Quinn, discussing their future plans and getting free from current obligations. The language was coded, but the implication was clear. Alden closed the laptop and sat in the darkness of his study. His wife was having an affair. She wanted out of their marriage, and her lover was apparently willing to help her achieve that goal by any means necessary. But wanting out of a marriage and attempted murder were two very different things. He needed more evidence before he could act. He opened a new document on his computer and began typing. A detailed timeline of events, a list of evidence, and a plan for gathering additional information. He worked with a methodical precision that had served him well during his military career at WY Dawn. He had the framework for his investigation. Now he needed to execute it without alerting his targets that they were being watched. The hunt had begun. Act I End ACT 2. Setting the TRP Scene 1. Marla slips 3 days after Nina's return from the hospital. Alden received a text message from Marla while he was at work. Taking Nina to Mom's for the weekend. We need some girl time after everything that happened. Alden's mother-in-law lived in Denver, 2 hours away. It would give him the entire weekend to continue his investigation without worrying about being observed. He texted back, "Good idea. Drive safe." But instead of going home after work on Friday, Alden drove to a sporting goods store and purchased a directional microphone and digital recorder, equipment supposedly for birdwatching. Then he went to an electronics store and bought a GPS tracking device small enough to fit under a car's bumper. That evening, he attached the tracker to Marla's car while it sat in his mother-in-law's driveway. The device would transmit location data to his phone, allowing him to monitor her movements remotely. On Saturday morning, the tracker showed Marla's car leaving Denver and heading toward the mountains. Alden followed at a distance, staying far enough back to remain undetected, but close enough to maintain visual contact. The car turned off the main highway onto a gravel road that led to Red Rocks Trail, a remote hiking area popular with locals, but rarely crowded. Alden parked at a different trailhead and hiked through the woods to a position overlooking the parking area. Through binoculars, he watched Marla get out of her car and walk toward a blue sedan. A man emerged from the sedan, tall, dark hair, expensive outdoor clothing. Quinn Halbier, based on the photos Alden had found in Marla's phone. They embraced like lovers who hadn't seen each other in weeks rather than days. Quinn's hands lingered on Marla's body in ways that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. Alden set up the directional microphone and aimed it toward the couple. The device was sensitive enough to pick up conversations from several hundred yards away, and the mountain air was still and clear. Quinn and Marla walked to a picnic table near the edge of the parking area. They sat close together, their voices carrying across the distance. "How's Nina?" Quinn asked. "Fine. Back to normal. She doesn't remember much about being sick." "Good. That's what we wanted." Alden adjusted the microphone's direction and increased the recording volume. This was it, the confirmation he'd been seeking. "I told you the dosage would be perfect," Quinn continued. "Enough to cause symptoms, not enough to cause permanent damage. I still can't believe we actually did it. It was necessary, Marla. We needed Alden to understand that his family isn't safe, that staying in this marriage puts Nina at risk. But what if he doesn't get the message? What if he still won't agree to a divorce?" Quinn reached across the table and took Marla's hand. "Then we moved to phase 2. "What's phase 2? "One more drink, he's gone. The kid too. We start over. You said you were ready." Marla was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was barely audible, but the microphone picked it up clearly. "I am. I just don't want to do it myself. You won't have to. I'll handle everything. You just need to make sure he drinks what I give you." "When?" "Soon. I'm working on getting access to something stronger. Something that will look like a heart attack or stroke. Natural causes." They sat in silence for several minutes, holding hands and looking out over the valley below. To any casual observer, they would have appeared to be a normal couple enjoying a romantic afternoon in the mountains. Alden continued recording for another 30 minutes, capturing additional details about their plans and timeline. Quinn had access to various drugs through his work as a clinical pharmacist. Marla would create opportunities for Alden to consume whatever Quinn provided. They discussed staging accidents, making deaths look natural, and starting fresh in another state once they had access to Alden's life insurance and savings. When they finally separated and returned to their cars, Alden had enough evidence to put them both in prison for conspiracy to commit murder. But he didn't drive straight to the police station. Instead, he went home and began planning his next move. Quinn and Marla had shown their hand, but they didn't know he was aware of their plans. That gave him a tactical advantage. He would use that advantage to destroy them both. Scene 2. The setup Monday morning, Alden requested a personal day from work and drove to the Loveland Police Department. He asked to speak with Detective Fallon Byrne, the investigator assigned to Nina's case. Detective Byrne was a woman in her mid-40s with graying hair and sharp green eyes. Her office was small and cluttered with case files, but she moved through the chaos with practiced efficiency. "Mr. Trask, I was planning to call you this week. We've made some progress on your daughter's case. That's actually what I wanted to discuss with you," Alden said. "But first, I have a hypothetical question." Byrne leaned back in her chair. "I'm listening. If I were to give you a case where a wife tried to poison her own daughter and husband, how far would the law go?" "That would depend on several factors. The strength of the evidence, the jurisdiction, the specific charges we could prove in court. Hypothetically, what would you need to build a solid case?" Byrne studied Alden's face carefully. "For attempted murder and conspiracy charges, we need proof of delivery, evidence that the suspect actually provided the poison. We need to establish motive, why they wanted the victims dead. We need to prove connection, that the suspect had access to the poison and the means to deliver it. And we need to demonstrate intent, that this was deliberate rather than accidental. How clean would the proof need to be? Clean enough to convince a jury beyond reasonable doubt. No guessing, no circumstantial evidence, no hearsay. We need delivery, motive, connection, and intent, all documented with physical evidence or reliable witness testimony." Alden nodded. "And if someone were to help you gather that evidence, as long as it was obtained legally, we'd certainly consider it. But I'd strongly advise anyone involved in such a situation to work with law enforcement rather than conducting their own investigation. Of course, this is all hypothetical, you understand." "Of course," Burns said, but her expression suggested she understood exactly what Alden was really asking. "One more question. How long would it typically take to obtain a warrant if you had probable cause?" "Depends on the circumstances. If lives were in immediate danger, we could get an emergency warrant within hours." "Why do you ask?" "Just curious about the process." Thank you for your time, Detective. As Alden stood to leave, Burns spoke again. Mr. Trask, if your hypothetical situation becomes real, please call me immediately. Don't try to handle it yourself. I'll keep that in mind. That afternoon, Alden drove to Lyle's office. His friend was hunched over a computer workstation, surrounded by multiple monitors displaying code and network diagrams. I need another favor, Alden said without preamble. What now? I need you to help me stage something. Something that will look real, but won't actually put anyone in danger. Lyle pushed back from his desk. Alden, you're starting to worry me. What are you planning? I'm going to give Quinn and Marla an opportunity to implement their plan, but I'll be controlling the variables. That sounds incredibly dangerous. Not if we do it right. I need you to help me create a realistic medical emergency that we can reverse quickly. Lyle was quiet for a long moment. You want to fake being poisoned? Exactly. Something that will cause symptoms consistent with the type of drugs Quinn has access to, but something we can counteract immediately. And you want to record them trying to kill you. I want to record them believing they've succeeded. This is insane, Alden. This is justice. Will you help me or not? Lyle sighed and turned back to his computer. Tell me what you need. They spent the next 2 hours researching drug interactions and physiological responses. Lyle's technical background included some knowledge of biochemistry from his college years, and he helped Alden understand how to create convincing symptoms without actually poisoning himself. Activated charcoal, Lyle said finally. If you take a large dose of activated charcoal tablets right before consuming whatever Quinn gives you, it will absorb most of the poison before it enters your bloodstream. You'll still get some symptoms, but not enough to cause permanent damage. How long would I have? Maybe 10 to 15 minutes before the charcoal stops being effective. You'd need medical intervention after that. That's enough time. Alden, this could still kill you. If you miscalculate the timing or the dosage, then Nina grows up without a father, but at least she won't grow up with a mother who tried to murder her. Lyle stared at his friend for a long moment. You've really thought this through, haven't you? I've thought about nothing else for a week. Okay, I'll help you, but we're going to plan this down to the minute. And we're going to have backup plans for every possible scenario. Agreed. They worked until late that evening, developing a detailed plan for the controlled sting operation. Every variable was considered, every risk calculated, every contingency planned, that by the time Alden went home, he knew exactly how he was going to trap Quinn and Marla in their own web of deceit. The opportunity came sooner than expected. On Wednesday evening, Marla announced that she was planning a special dinner for Friday night. Just the two of us, she said, smiling warmly. Nina can stay at your mother's for the night. We need some time to reconnect after everything that's happened. That sounds nice, Alden replied, knowing exactly what kind of reconnection she had in mind. He spent Thursday preparing a visit to Gretchen's house to explain the situation and arrange for Nina's safety. A call to Detective Byrne to alert her that he might need immediate assistance on Friday evening. A final review of the plan with Lyle. You're sure about the timing? Lyle asked for the 10th time. 15 minutes maximum. You'll be monitoring from the van outside, and you'll call the paramedics at exactly 14 minutes. And the audio recording. Multiple devices. Hidden cameras will capture everything that happens after I collapse. Alden, there are about 50 ways this could go wrong. There are about 1,000 ways that Quinn and Marla could kill Nina and me if we don't stop them now. Friday evening arrived with unseasonable warmth and clear skies. Alden dropped Nina off at Gretchen's house, giving his daughter an extra long hug before leaving. See you tomorrow morning, sweetheart. Bye, Daddy. Have fun with Mommy. If only she knew, Alden thought as he drove home. Marla had prepared an elaborate meal steak, roasted vegetables, candlelight, and wine. She wore a black dress that he'd always loved, and her makeup was perfect. She looked beautiful and loving and completely devoted to their marriage. She also looked like a woman who was planning to become a widow before the evening was over. This is wonderful, Alden said as they sat down to eat. What's the occasion? Do I need an occasion to make a nice dinner for my husband? Of course not. I just wasn't expecting anything this elaborate. They made conversation about work, about Nina's recovery, about their plans for the weekend. Marla seemed relaxed and happy, more attentive than she'd been in months. After dinner, She brought out a bottle of wine that Alden didn't recognize. "Something special I picked up today," she said, pouring 2 glasses. "I thought we could have a drink and just talk." "Sure." Alden accepted the glass, noting that Marla had poured his drink from a different part of the bottle than her own. Before lifting the glass to his lips, Alden excused himself to use the bathroom. Once out of Marla's sight, he quickly swallowed 4 activated charcoal tablets and returned to the dining room. "Cheers," Marla said, raising her glass. "To new beginnings," Alden replied, meeting her eyes as he drank. The wine tasted normal, perhaps slightly bitter, but nothing that would raise suspicion. Alden finished the glass and complimented Marla on her choice. They moved to the living room to continue talking. Marla seemed nervous now, checking her phone frequently and glancing toward the front windows. After 10 minutes, Alden began to feel the first symptoms. Mild dizziness, slight nausea, a tingling sensation in his extremities. The activated charcoal was absorbing most of the poison, but not all of it. "I'm feeling a little strange," he said, standing up from the couch. "Strange how?" Marla's voice was carefully neutral. "Dizzy. Nauseous." Alden staggered slightly, grabbing the back of his chair for support. "Maybe you should sit down." "Yeah, maybe I should." Alden allowed himself to collapse onto the couch, his breathing becoming shallow and rapid. Through half-closed eyes, he watched Marla's reaction. She didn't call 911. She didn't rush to his side. Instead, she pulled out her phone and sent a text message. 2 minutes later, the front door opened. Quinn Halbier walked into the living room like he belonged there, carrying a small medical bag. "How long has he been like this?" Quinn asked, checking Alden's pulse. "About 5 minutes." "Is he not yet?" "But soon." Quinn opened his bag and pulled out a syringe. "This will make sure." "Quinn, no. We said we'd let the wine do the work. The wine might not be enough. This will look like a heart attack brought on by acute stress. No one will question it." Alden forced himself to remain limp and unresponsive as Quinn approached with the syringe. Every muscle in his body wanted to fight, but he needed them to incriminate themselves completely. Quinn knelt beside the couch and prepared to inject the syringe into Alden's neck. "Wait," Marla said suddenly. "What about Nina? What if she finds him? Nina's at your mother-in-law's house, remember? She won't be back until tomorrow morning. By then, the paramedics will have already been here and taken the body away." "The body," Marla repeated quietly. "God, Quinn, we're really doing this. We're doing what's necessary. You want your freedom, don't you? You want to be with me." "Yes, but then this is the only way." Quinn lowered the syringe toward Alden's neck. At the last second, Alden opened his eyes. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," he said clearly. Quinn jerked backward, nearly dropping the syringe. Marla screamed. "Surprise," Alden said, sitting up on the couch. "Did you really think I didn't know what you were planning?" The front door burst open. Detective Byrne entered with 2 uniformed officers, their weapons drawn. "Nobody move." "Police." Quinn raised his hands, the syringe still clutched in his fingers. Marla pressed herself against the wall, her face pale with shock. "How?" she whispered. "Activated charcoal," Alden said, standing up slowly. "Absorbed most of your poison before it could do any real damage. Though I have to say, Quinn, your bedside manner could use some work." Detective Byrne moved efficiently through the room, securing evidence and reading rights. Quinn and Marla were handcuffed and separated for questioning. "Mr. Trask, are you injured?" Byrne asked. "I'll need medical attention to counteract whatever's left in my system, but I should be fine. The paramedics are outside. We'll get you checked out immediately." As Alden was being examined by the EMTs, Lyle emerged from the police van where he'd been monitoring the audio and video feeds. "Did we get everything?" Alden asked. "Every word. Video, audio, multiple camera angles. Their conversation about Nina's poisoning, their plans to kill you, the attempted injection, all of it." Detective Byrne approached with an evidence bag containing the syringe. "Potassium chloride," she said. "Enough to cause cardiac arrest in a healthy adult. Combined with the asapromazine in the wine, it would have been lethal within minutes. The same compound that was used on Nina. No, that was asapromazine alone. This was meant to finish the job." Alden watched as Quinn and Marla were loaded into separate police cars. Marla caught his eye through the window, her expression a mixture of rage and disbelief. "You think this makes you better than me?" she shouted. Alden walked over to the police car and looked down at his wife through the open window. "No," he said quietly. "Just smarter." The car doors closed, and the vehicles pulled away into the night. The Loveland Police Department was buzzing with activity as news of the arrest spread through the building. Double attempted murder cases involving spouses and children were rare, and the evidence that Alden and Lyle had gathered was being called textbook by investigators. Detective Byrne found Alden in the waiting area at 2 a.m., holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Tired, relieved, angry. That's understandable. We finished processing the initial evidence, and I wanted to give you an update." "What did you find?" Quinn's medical bag contained enough controlled substances to stock a small pharmacy. Acipromazine, potassium chloride, succinylcholine, propofol, all substances that could cause death while leaving minimal forensic traces. "How'd he get access to all of that?" "He's been falsifying inventory reports at the pharmacy where he works. Small amounts taken over several months. His employer is cooperating fully with our investigation." "And Marla?" "She's not talking yet, but we found text messages on her phone discussing the timeline for your death and how to access your life insurance policies. We also found emails to Quinn containing detailed information about your daily routines, your food preferences, and when you would be alone in the house." Alden stared in his coffee cup. "She was planning this for months." "It appears so. We also found evidence that she had researched your military service records, specifically looking for information about any PTSD or stress-related conditions that might explain a sudden heart attack. She wanted it to look natural." "Very much so. If you hadn't discovered their plan and taken action, we likely never would have identified this as a homicide." "What happens now?" "They'll be formally charged tomorrow morning. Given the evidence we have, the district attorney is confident about pursuing first-degree attempted murder charges for both suspects, plus conspiracy, child endangerment, and several drug-related charges." "What kind of sentence are we looking at?" "If convicted on all charges, they're both looking at 20 to life without possibility of parole." Alden nodded slowly. Justice. Real, meaningful justice for what they had tried to do to Nina and to him. "Detective Byrne? Thank you for trusting me to see this through. You took a hell of a risk, Mr. Trask. It could have gone wrong in a dozen different ways. But it didn't. No, it didn't. You got them to confess to attempted murder on camera. You have them dead to rights." "Good." Byrne studied Alden's face. "How are you going to explain all this to Nina?" "Very carefully. She's going to need therapy, probably for years. But she's strong, and she has people who love her. What about you? Are you going to be okay?" Alden was quiet for a long moment. "I trusted my wife to love our daughter. I trusted her to honor our marriage vows. I trusted her not to try to murder us for money. That's a lot of trust to lose all at once. I'll never trust anyone that way again. That might not be the healthiest approach. Maybe not, but it's a realistic one." Detective Byrne handed him a business card. "If you need anything over the next few weeks, questions about the case, referrals for counseling, anything at all, call me." "I will. Thank you." As Alden drove home in the pre-dawn darkness, he thought about the conversation he would need to have with Nina. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that her mother tried to kill her? How do you help a child understand that kind of betrayal without destroying her ability to trust other people? He didn't have answers to those questions yet, but he had time to figure them out. Quinn and Marla would spend the rest of their lives in prison cells, while he and Nina would build a new life together. A life based on honesty, safety, and the kind of love that didn't come with hidden agendas. It wasn't the ending he had expected when he said "I do" 9 years ago. But it was justice, and sometimes justice was enough. 6 months later, the courthouse in Loveland was packed with reporters, curious locals, and family members as the trial of Marla Trask and Quinn Halbier began. The case had attracted regional media attention due to its unusual circumstances. A mother attempting to poison her own child as part of an elaborate murder plot. Alden sat in the front row of the gallery, wearing his best suit and a grim expression. Beside him sat Gretchen, holding Nina's hand. They had decided that Nina should attend the opening statements, old enough to understand that justice was being served, but young enough to be excused before the most disturbing evidence was presented. District Attorney Rebecca Martinez stood before the jury, her voice clear and confident as she outlined the prosecution's case. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, over the next week you will hear evidence of a conspiracy so callous, so calculating, that it challenges our understanding of human nature. You will hear how a mother deliberately poisoned her 8-year-old daughter with veterinary sedatives. You will hear how she and her lover planned to murder her husband for insurance money. And you will hear, in their own words, recorded on the very night they attempted to carry out their plan, exactly how little regard they had for human life. Martinez walked over to the evidence table and picked up a clear plastic bag containing the syringe that Quinn had tried to use on Alden. This syringe contains enough potassium chloride to stop a human heart within minutes. The defendants intended to inject this into Alden Trask's neck while he lay unconscious from the wine they had poisoned. They believed he was dying, and they were prepared to finish the job themselves. She turned to face Quinn and Marla at the defense table. Both defendants were dressed conservatively, their lawyers having coached them to appear sympathetic and remorseful. Quinn stared straight ahead, his expression blank. Marla dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, though Alden noticed she produced no actual tears. You will hear recordings of the defendants discussing their crimes in detail. You will see video evidence of their attempted murder. You will hear testimony from medical experts about the effects of the drugs they used. And when you have heard all of this evidence, you will have no choice but to find both defendants guilty of attempted murder in the first degree. The defense attorneys presented their cases with the enthusiasm of lawyers who knew they were fighting a losing battle. Quinn's attorney argued that his client had been manipulated by a seductive woman who wanted freedom from her marriage. Marla's attorney claimed that her client had been coerced by a domineering lover who threatened her if she didn't cooperate. Neither argument was particularly convincing, especially when the prosecution began presenting its evidence. Detective Byrne took the stand and walked the jury through the investigation, explaining how the security camera had been disabled, how the acipromazine had been acquired, and how the couple had planned to make their crimes look like accidents or natural deaths. Lyle testified about recovering deleted messages from Marla's phones, providing technical details about how the digital evidence had been preserved and authenticated. Dr. Mason explained the effects of acipromazine on a child Nina's size, emphasizing that the dosage could easily have been fatal if Nina had consumed the entire cookie. But the most damning evidence came from the audio and video recordings from the night of the attempted murder. The courtroom fell silent as the jury listened to Quinn and Marla discussing their plan to kill Alden, their casual references to Nina's poisoning, and their complete lack of remorse for their actions. One more drink, he's gone. The kid too. We start over. I am. I just don't want to do it myself. This will look like a heart attack brought on by acute stress. No one will question it. The recordings played for nearly 20 minutes, capturing every incriminating word. Several jury members looked sick by the time the audio ended. Alden was called to testify on the fourth day of the trial. He walked to the witness stand with the same calm confidence he'd shown throughout the investigation, answering the prosecutor's questions in a clear, steady voice. Mr. Trask, how did you feel when you realized your wife had poisoned your daughter? Angry, betrayed, determined to protect Nina from any further harm. Why didn't you go to the police immediately? I needed proof. Suspicion isn't evidence. I knew that if I was going to accuse my wife of attempted murder, I needed documentation that would hold up in court. Were you afraid during the sting operation? Yes, but I was more afraid of what would happen to Nina if I didn't stop them. Do you regret the way you handled this situation? Alden looked directly at Marla as he answered. I regret that it was necessary. I don't regret protecting my daughter. During cross-examination, Marla's attorney tried to portray Alden as a controlling husband who had driven his wife into the arms of another man. Isn't it true, Mr. Trask, that your wife felt trapped in your marriage? If she felt trapped, she was free to file for divorce at any time. But divorce can be expensive, complicated, less expensive and complicated than attempted murder. You staged an elaborate deception to entrap my client. Doesn't that suggest you were looking for revenge rather than justice. I was looking for evidence. Your client provided that evidence when she and her lover tried to inject me with a lethal dose of potassium chloride. But you deliberately put yourself in danger. Your client deliberately put my daughter in danger. And she would have done it again if she hadn't been stopped. The attorney tried several more approaches, but Alden remained calm and factual throughout his testimony. When he stepped down from the witness stand, even the defense lawyers seemed to acknowledge that their case was hopeless. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood to deliver the verdict. On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree regarding Nina Trask, we find the defendant Marla Trask guilty. On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree regarding Alden Trask, we find the defendant Marla Trask guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendant Marla Trask guilty. The verdicts continued for both defendants across all charges. Guilty on every count. Judge Patricia Harrison sentenced both Quinn and Marla to 25 years to life without possibility of parole to be served consecutively for each attempted murder charge. The court finds that these crimes represent a level of premeditation and callousness that demands the harshest possible sentence, she said. The defendants showed no regard for the life of an innocent child and no remorse for their actions. They will remain in prison for the rest of their natural lives. As the bailiffs led Quinn and Marla away in shackles, Marla turned toward the gallery where Alden sat with Nina and Gretchen. Her expression was no longer that of a remorseful defendant. Instead, her face showed the cold hatred that Alden had suspected was always there, hidden beneath the facade of suburban respectability. Nina squeezed Alden's hand. "Is it over, Daddy?" "Yes, sweetheart. It's over." 2 months after the trial, Alden finished packing the last of their belongings into the moving truck. He and Nina were relocating to a neighborhood on the other side of Loveland, away from the house where so much betrayal and pain had occurred. The new house was smaller but brighter, with a large backyard where Nina could play safely. Gretchen had decided to sell her own home and move in with them, creating a 3-generation household that felt more like a family than anything Alden had experienced in years. "Daddy, can I pick which room is mine?" Nina asked, bouncing around the empty living room. "Of course. Any room except Grandma's and mine." Nina raced upstairs to explore while Alden and Gretchen finished loading boxes. His daughter had adapted to their new circumstances with the resilience that children often showed. She had attended therapy sessions twice a week since the trial, and while she still had occasional nightmares about the bad cookie, she was generally happy and well-adjusted. "How are you holding up?" Gretchen asked as they worked. "Better than I expected." "Different than I expected." "Different how?" "I thought I'd be angrier. I thought I'd want revenge beyond just seeing them convicted. And you don't. I wanted justice. We got justice. They'll spend the rest of their lives in prison, and Nina is safe. That's enough. You're a better man than most would be in your situation." "I'm not sure about that. I just know that carrying hatred around wouldn't help Nina, and it wouldn't help me." That evening, after they'd moved into the new house and eaten pizza for dinner, Alden tucked Nina into her new bedroom. She had chosen the room with the best view of the backyard, where she could watch birds and squirrels from her window. "Daddy, do you think Mommy will ever come back?" It was a question Nina asked periodically, and Alden had learned to answer it honestly but gently. "No, sweetheart. Mommy made some very bad choices, and now she has to stay in prison for the rest of her life." "Do you miss her?" "I miss the person I thought she was. But that person wasn't real. I'm glad we have Grandma now." "Me too, and I'm glad you're not sick anymore." "I was never really sick, Nina. That was all pretend to catch the bad people." "I know, but I'm still glad." Alden kissed his daughter goodnight and went downstairs, where Gretchen was making tea in their new kitchen. "She's settling in well," Gretchen said. "Kids are resilient. So are adults, sometimes." They sat together in comfortable silence, drinking tea and listening to the sounds of their new neighborhood. Somewhere down the street, a dog was barking. A television played quietly in a nearby house. Normal sounds of normal people living normal lives that Alden's phone buzzed with a text message. Lyle's name appeared on the screen. "Heard about your promotion at work. Congratulations, man. Well deserved." Alden smiled. His supervisor at the manufacturing plant had been impressed with how he'd handled the crisis with his family and had offered him a position in management with better pay and more flexibility to spend time with Nina. Thanks, he texted back. Want to come over for dinner this weekend? Gretchen is making her famous pot roast. Absolutely. See you Saturday. Lyle had become a regular fixture in their lives since the trial. His loyalty during the investigation had deepened their friendship, and Nina adored her uncle Lyle, who brought her computer games and taught her basic programming concepts. Lyle's coming for dinner Saturday, Alden told his mother. Good. That boy needs more home-cooked meals. And we need more friends like him. Yes, we do. Later that night, after Gretchen had gone to bed, Alden sat on the front porch of their new house. The street was quiet and peaceful, lined with mature trees and well-maintained homes. Their neighbors had introduced themselves when a moving truck arrived, welcoming them to the area with genuine warmth. IT wasn't the life Alden had planned when he married Marla 9 years ago. But it was a good life built on honesty and trust and the kind of love that didn't come with hidden conditions that he thought about Detective Byrne, who still called periodically to check on their family. She had told him that his case had become a teaching example at the police academy, demonstrating how civilian cooperation could lead to successful prosecution of domestic violence cases. He thought about Dr. Mason, who had saved Nina's life and testified at the trial with professional competence and personal compassion. He thought about all the people who had helped them through the darkest period of their lives, proving that not everyone was capable of the betrayal that Marla and Quinn had. Demonstrated that a car drove slowly down the street, its headlights sweeping across the front yard. The driver waved Mrs. Patterson from next door, returning from her evening shift at the hospital. Alden waved back and went inside to check on Nina one more time before going to bed. She was sleeping peacefully, her stuffed elephant tucked under one arm and a smile on her face. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities. But tonight, they were safe, they were together, and they were home. That was enough. 3 years after the trial, on a crisp morning in October, Alden found an envelope in his mailbox with familiar handwriting. The return address showed the Colorado State Penitentiary for Women, and the sender's name was Marla Trask. He stared at the envelope for a long moment, standing beside the mailbox in his work clothes. Nina was at school, Gretchen was at her book club, and he had a few minutes before he needed to leave for his job as operations manager at the plant. The envelope felt thin, probably containing only a single sheet of paper. Whatever Marla had to say, she hadn't needed many words to say it. Alden walked back into the house and sat down at the kitchen table. He turned the envelope over in his hands, noting that it had been opened and inspected by prison officials before being sealed again with clear tape. For 3 years, he had wondered if this day would come, if Marla would eventually reach out from prison, seeking forgiveness or contact with Nina, or simply wanting to have the last word in their story. Now that the moment had arrived, he realized he had no curiosity about what the letter contained, no desire to read her words or understand her perspective or give her any access to the life he and Nina had built. He stood up and walked to the fireplace in the living room. The morning was cool enough to justify a fire, and Gretchen had already laid kindling and newspapers in the grate. Alden struck a match and held it to the paper until flames began to spread. Then he placed Marla's unopened letter on top of the kindling and watched it burn. The paper caught fire quickly, curling and blackening as the flames consumed whatever words Marla had written. Apology or manipulation, regret or anger, it didn't matter. He had no interest in reading any of it. Daddy, Nina's voice came from the front hallway. I forgot my science project. Alden turned away from the fireplace. Nina stood in the doorway wearing her backpack and school uniform, her hair in the neat braids that Gretchen had taught her to make. It's upstairs on your desk, he said. But hurry, or you'll miss the bus. Nina ran upstairs while Alden continued watching the letter burn. By the time she returned with her project, a model of the solar system made from painted foam balls, the envelope had been reduced to ash. What was that? Nina asked, noticing the fireplace. Trash, Alden said. Nothing worth remembering. Oh, Daddy, can Uncle Lyle come to my school play next week? I'm sure he'd love to. I'll ask him tonight. Nina gave him a quick hug and ran out to catch the school bus. Alden heard the front door slam, followed by the sound of her backpack bouncing as she jogged down the sidewalk. Through the living room window, he watched her climb onto the bus and wave goodbye. She was 11 now, tall for her age and confident in a way that suggested the trauma of her early childhood was becoming a distant memory rather than a defining experience. Her therapist had told them that children who survived traumatic events often developed unusual strength and resilience. Nina had proven that theory correct, excelling in school and forming close friendships with kids who knew nothing about her family's history. The fire in the fireplace had burned down to glowing embers. Alden used the poker to spread the ashes, ensuring that every trace of Marla's letter was destroyed. His phone rang. Gretchen's number appeared on the screen. "Good morning, Mom." "Good morning, honey. I'm running late getting home from book club. Can you pick up Nina from school today?" "Of course." "What time?" 3:30. "And Alden?" "Well, called. I want to know if we're still planning to go camping this weekend." "Tell him yes. Nina's been looking forward to it all month." "I will. Love you." "Love you too." Alden hung up and checked his watch. Time to leave for work. He put on his jacket and grabbed his keys from the kitchen counter. Before leaving, he took one last look at the fireplace. The ashes had cooled to gray powder, indistinguishable from the remnants of newspaper and kindling. Outside, the October morning was bright and clear. His neighbors were beginning their daily routines, walking dogs, loading children into cars, heading off to work and school. Mrs. Patterson waved from her front yard where she was raking leaves. "Beautiful morning, isn't it?" "Yes, it is," Alden replied. He got into his truck and drove toward the plant, thinking about the day ahead. A production meeting at 9, lunch with his management team, a conference call with corporate headquarters in the afternoon. Normal responsibilities for a normal life. A red light. He checked his rearview mirror. Behind him, Loveland stretched out in all directions, suburban neighborhoods and shopping centers, schools and parks, the ordinary landscape of middle-class American life. Somewhere in the distance, beyond the mountains, Marla sat in a prison cell where she would remain for the rest of her life. Quinn occupied a similar cell in a different facility, their paths unlikely to cross again outside of legal proceedings. But here, in this truck at this intersection on this ordinary October morning, none of that mattered. The past was ash and a fireplace. The present was a daughter who smiled and laughed and trusted the world to be a safe place. The light turned green. Alden drove forward into the day, leaving the shadows behind. Peace isn't forgiveness. Peace is justice done right.